rise. Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record on Mark Jensen's case. The jury is back in the courtroom. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. The objection was overruled and the question will be allowed. So go ahead, Ms. McNeil.
So, Mr. Klug, I was asking you after you made that statement about Mr. Jensen's wife being dead, what did Ms. Bauer say?
She said, "Oh my God, he killed her."
Now, in terms of your conversation with Mark Jensen, did you ever confront him about it?
I didn't.
And then there was a time period when you learned that Mark Jensen had been charged with killing his wife.
That's correct.
And when was that approximately?
I thought it was like 06 or 07. I'm not sure.
Was it possible it was as old as 2002?
Oh, yeah, it could have been.
And then did something else happen in around 2006, 2007 related to this?
Like the evidentiary hearing?
Right, like someone reaching out to you about the case?
Well, I had made one phone call to the Pleasant Prairie Department, but the only thing they had asked me about was Mark using your computer? And I said he was, but the firm had replaced all of the computers in an upgrade. So it's kind of like I just didn't say anything after that to them.
So I just want to break this down by time period.
Yes.
There's a time period when you learn that Mark Jensen's wife is dead, correct?
That's correct.
And then after that, you did not tell police or prosecutors or anyone in authority about what Mark Jensen had said, correct?
No, I didn't.
And after that time period, did you tell your wife that Mark Jensen's wife had died?
Yes.
And tell us about that conversation.
Objection calls for hearsay.
Well, initially he's just telling us that the conversation occurred, so I don't think this question calls.
Well, you're getting close. I mean, he can talk about what he said to his wife. I don't have a problem with that.
Basically, I told her what had happened with the phone call from Mark, telling me that, that his wife had died. And then I let her know that Mark was being charged with killing his wife, that he was arrested, and he wasn't the manager anymore of the Racine office.
So during this time period, after hearing about the death of Mark Jensen's wife, and then after hearing that he had been charged with that, did your wife, Joanne, give you any advice about coming forward?
Objection again calls for hearsay.
This is not hearsay. This is a fact on the listener. It does not matter if it's true or not. It's what she told him.
I'll let you ask the one question, but we're not going to get any more into what his wife said. Okay, you can ask this one question. Go ahead.
All right. So did your wife advise you either way about whether you should come forward?
She said she would support me in whatever decision that I made.
And at that time, you made the decision not to tell anyone in authority about what you
Yes,
knew.
I did not want to get involved.
Now, it is true that some people that you worked with did know what Mark Jensen had told you because you had told them.
Yes, that was Quinn Yorton. He was the manager of the Green Bay office, and I knew he had some police background, so I was asking him questions.
And so were you seeking his advice?
Yes.
And after that conversation with Mr. Yorton, did you make a call either to the Pleasant Prairie Police Department or to prosecutors?
Yes, I called, I believe I called the courthouse or somebody then they wanted to question me after that.
Now, when you did that, did you talk about this conversation you've just described at the hotel at the conference?
Yes,
You're saying that you told in
I-
2000, you're saying that in that call that you talked about the specific conversation where Mark Jensen said he had killed his wife?
yes.
Objection, I think we need a time frame here.
You want to put a date in or a year? Or
So it might help if I show Mr. Klug. I have another exhibit. This is State's Exhibit 13.
all right, show them 13.
This was about to happen at the YSL trial.
Yes, the,
So let me just ask you about that particular exhibit. Do you recognize what State's Exhibit 13 is?
yes, that's my handwriting on a document describing what I had remembered from the conversation.
Some notes that you had taken?
Yes.
And what prompted you to write down those notes that you see in State's Exhibit 13?
Quinn had told me to keep like a log, to try to jog your memory. So it was on 3/21/02, I called the DA office and left a voicemail in Kenosha.
All right. But to be clear, when you made that phone call, you did not describe this conversation at the
No,
hotel.
that's correct. Yep.
And then you said something about computers. Is that what you talked about?
Yeah, then that probably was the next conversation about they wanted to know if Mark was using any computers. And I said he would have used the computers in my office, but that we had replaced those computers in a firm-wide upgrade.
So, Mr. Klug, can you tell us why you didn't tell the police or prosecutors or someone in authority about this conversation?
I was scared of Mark. I was scared of the fact that if he killed his wife, what could happen to me?
Now, I want you to think back to the time period of July of 2007. Do you remember during that time period someone from the district attorney's office reaching out to you?
Yes.
And was it only at that point that you told the district attorney's office about this conversation with Mark Jensen?
I believe so, yes.
And then shortly thereafter, shortly after that contact, did you end up testifying at a hearing about that?
Yes, because they wanted to get my statements of my recollection of what had happened.
And then sometime a few months later, did you testify again? Do you recall? So do you recall 2 prior testimonies?
Yes.
And then at some point before the second testimony, is that when you discovered those notes you're looking at in State's Exhibit 13?
Yes, because I went through all my compliance files and found notes.
And so you turned those notes over?
Yes.
And so again, what was the time period of those notes in State's Exhibit 13?
The date was 3/21/02, and then 4/10/02. And then there's no other dates beyond that. Oh, I'm sorry. These are notes saying when the conference was, and when the weekend was that Kelly was at my office and Mark was at the office. Did you want me to read the notes?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
Now, during the course of taking these notes, was that to remind yourself about this conversation that you had with Mark Jensen?
Yes,
And at that point, that was acting on the advice of Quinn Yorton.
that's correct.
All right. And so in these notes, do you note things like Mark Jensen wanting to get rid of his wife?
Yes. He's saying how unhappy his marriage was and that, where are we at here? He wanted to get rid of her.
And I see that you wrote down the word psycho. Was that in reference to
To
Mark
Mark,
Jensen?
yes.
Was it in reference to him or
Oh,
him referring to his wife?
What page is that on?
So that would be the fourth page, the top of the fourth page.
He wanted to get rid of her. Psycho. Next. I'm thinking it was about his wife that he was telling me that she was psycho because it was he wanted to get rid of her was the comment before on the previous page.
And then did you also note that it seemed like he was trying to be your friend or wanted to be your friend?
Yeah.
And then finally, did you note something about Benadryl and an OD?
Yes. Okay, so next Monday, unless your thought was odd, talked every few weeks, would call every so often, try to say Benadryl overdose, get out of bed. She was depressed. And then I just put, he was my boss from 10/1/98 to 3/15 of 99.
And then you note the 10-1, by that date, you note that Kelly came to the office?
Yes, yep. And I put 10/1 weekend, 01, Kelly came to set up the office. I can't read my writing. Two people, conversation, uneasy about.
That's what Gunner gonna do.
Yeah, it's basic notes about what I wanted to remember.
Now, is it fair to say that as you look at these notes, this is not like how someone would write out a statement, correct?
No, it would be random thoughts that would have been talked about as during a conversation.
So like if someone else is looking at this, they might not be able to interpret what you've written, correct?
Correct. Or read it because my writing isn't good.
Like for instance, if you look at the first page of these notes, do you see something written there, sick feeling in stomach?
Yes, a sick feeling in stomach, Quinn Yorton recommended. So
Now, do you know what you were talking about when you wrote that?
I think it was talking about my feelings because it was like bringing up, it was hard to talk about it.
So anticipating maybe calling the police or talking to the police
Yes.
about this?
Yes,
All right. And so again, you turn these over once you found these?
yes,
And you believe you found them at some point before your second testimony?
yes.
Now, Mr. Klug, do you remember someone working at Stiefel Nicholas by the name of Dave Naring?
Yes, Dave Nearing was a fellow investment broker. He worked in Mark's office.
And did you ever have contact with Dave Naring?
I've talked to Dave, yes.
And do you remember ever talking to him about what Mark had told you?
Yeah, he was Mark's best friend. And he was telling me,
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
So just tell us about what you said in this conversation with Dave Naring that we're talking about.
sure. Mark always would sit in his office with the door closed and the blinds closed. He's Dave spent a lot of time at Mark and Julie's house.
Objection, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Klug, what I'm trying to ask you is whether there
Can
was
I just sustain the objection
I'm sorry.
first? It's okay. Thank you.
sustained. All right. So, Mr. Klug, what I'm trying to ask you is with Dave Naring, was there a point in time where you would have told him or mentioned to him this conversation that Mark had with you about killing his wife?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember the context of that?
The context was, they were coworkers in the office and friends, and I wanted to tell them what was going on.
So you knew that Dave Naring, even though he didn't work in your office, you knew he knew Mark Jensen.
Right, because it was another office close by.
Now, Mr. Klug, to be clear, when prosecutors reached out to you in the summer of 2007 to talk to you about this conversation, you knew at that time that Mark Jensen had been criminally charged with killing his wife, didn't you?
Yes,
So you knew it was a serious conversation, correct?
that's correct.
And you knew it was important to be as accurate as possible, correct?
That's correct.
And then it was just within a couple days of that you testified the first time, correct?
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you about things that have happened more recently. Did you and your wife, Joanne Klug, did you divorce?
Yes, she filed for divorce in September of 2011, and it was final February of 14.
And your wife, Joanne, does she now live out of state somewhere?
Yes, she does.
And in terms of your life, have you remarried?
I remarried in 2015.
Now, was there a time period, I want you to think back approximately a year ago, last December, was there a time period where someone acting as an investigator for Mark Jensen came to talk to you?
Yes, it was my grandson's birthday, and I had arrived at their house, and there was somebody there. I don't remember his name, but he wanted to have a conversation about the Jensen trial. And I said, well, it's my grandson's birthday. I can talk for a few minutes. And then, because I thought I was compelled to talk, I didn't have to talk to him. I was just being cooperative.
Okay, so you did talk to that person?
Yes.
And was that for a fairly long amount of time?
Yeah, it ended up being probably an hour and a half.
And so then to be clear, you've talked in detail about what has occurred. You testified twice.
Yes,
There's also this investigator person you talked to. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Just about your observations during that conversation, do you have any idea whether that conversation was being recorded?
Objection, relevance.
I'm going to sustain that.
Now, Mr. Klug, do you have any expectation of getting money as a result of testifying in this case?
No,
And you've been a known witness in this case from 2007, is that correct?
that's correct.
And has it caused you to get a bunch of money?
Have not received one penny. It's cost me money to be a witness.
Okay, I have no further questions, and I would just move the exhibits that were testified to, so that's
Can you,
11.
Just say those numbers for the record.
Yes, so that would be 11, 12, and 13.
All right, subject to cross to 11, 12, and 13 will come in. Who's doing the cross? Go ahead, Ms. Renner.
So, Mr. Klug, you testified you first spoke with Mark Jensen over the telephone, correct?
What are you talking about?
When you very first met Mark Jensen, your first conversation with him was over the telephone.
Yes,
And this was the conversation about transitioning from your former brokerage to Stifel Nicholas?
yeah, that's correct.
And this was a business conversation.
Yes.
It's not a social or a personal conversation.
No, because I didn't know Mark.
And you then met Mark in person on October 1st.
Yes,
And that's when he was in Appleton to help with the transition.
that's correct.
And your conversations that day were also business related.
That's correct.
They weren't personal.
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Jensen had become your supervisor upon the transition. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's because you did not have the right kind of license to supervise the office.
To supervise the trades, he was managing the trades. I was managing the day-to-day operations of the office.
Now, Mr. Jensen, though, is only your supervisor for about 5 months.
Yes,
In fact, he worked out of the Racine office.
correct.
You were in the Appleton office. That weekend in October was the only time that you had Mr. Jensen in your office. Is that correct?
Yes,
As your supervisor?
yes,
And that's when you got your Series 8 license in March of 1999, correct?
that's correct.
And after that, Mr. Jensen was no longer supervising you in any way.
That's correct.
So prior to the Blueprint conference, you had what, maybe 20, 25 minutes worth of conversation with Mr. Jensen?
He was there the whole weekend.
He was there,
Yes,
but you said he was hanging out in an office?
yes, with the door closed.
And so he was talking, but he was talking to you during that whole weekend?
There would have been some conversation, probably if I had a question on a form or, procedures.
And so those conversations would have all been business related, correct?
Correct.
And they weren't personal or social in nature?
No,
So then you go to the Blueprint conference, correct?
correct.
And let's turn then to that Friday night. Now, after a day of listening to different speakers, there was a cocktail hour.
Correct.
And during that cocktail hour, you drank.
Yes.
And what did you drink?
Y'all can see where she going. She trying to create a jealousy narrative that he was jealous of Mark Jensen, and this is why he said those allegations.
Probably, I don't remember. It was some form of alcohol. Could have been a beer, mixed drink, depending on what was there.
Well, you testified previously in this matter, correct?
Yes,
And the testimony on July 30th of 2007, and for council, that's page 20, lines 4 for 12.
Thank you.
So on July 30th, you were asked the question, would you have a cocktail prior to dinner? Answer, yeah, that there would have been a social hour before dinner.
correct.
Question, and what's your usual drink? Answer, a couple of drinks. Question, And so what's your usual drink? Answer, I'll drink a Bud Light. Question, so you think you had at least 2 Bud Lights and a couple glasses of wine? Answer, correct. Was that your testimony?
You're reading it. I don't see it in front of me.
Do you recall testifying to that?
Yes.
And so those couple glasses of wine were during dinner, right?
Yes, correct.
Now, you also testified on January 8th of 2008 in this matter, correct?
Okay. Yes.
Well, you testified twice.
Okay.
And counsel, this would be page 177, lines 1 through 4
177 on the transcript, you're saying?
on the transcript,
And lines?
1 through 4. So on January 8th of 2008, you testified in this matter. And to be clear, for both of these times that you testified, you did have to raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you did testify
Yes, that's what you're reading.
after swearing to do so, right?
Yes.
And on January 8th of 2008, the question was, and on Friday night, you had a happy hour? Answer, there was a happy hour, yes. And question, you had 2 Crown and Cokes? Answer, yes. Was that your testimony on January 8th of 2008?
Yes.
So today, you don't remember what you drank that night,
It was 20 years ago.
but it could have been beers and it could have been Crown and Cokes?
Possibly.
And as we already established, you had a glass or 2 of wine at dinner.
With food, yes.
And then after dinner, you went to the lobby bar.
Correct.
And you were drinking in the lobby bar,
Correct.
having about 1 or 2, probably about 2 an hour, would you say?
I don't know.
So again, you testified on July 30th of 2007. Counsel, this will be page 20, lines 16 to 25.
That's the page on the transcript?
Yep. For July 30th, 2007.
Right, let me just. Transcript starts on.
But
Okay,
my
thank
apologies.
you.
So on July 30th of 2007, you testified, well, I should say, you were asked, and what did you have to drink? The court asked in the lounge. Question, in the lobby. Thank you, Judge. Your answer was, at that time, I would have had a few more beers with the group. Question, and how many? Answer, 2 or 3. Question, how many were you drinking every hour? Answer, probably 2 an hour.
Okay.
Is that your testimony at that time?
Yes.
And that night you were drinking a mixture of Crown Royal and Coke and beers?
Yes.
So in total, you had probably 11, 12 drinks that night?
Possibly.
And during the time in the bar, you were socializing, right?
Yes.
You were talking to different people,
Correct.
and you said that things started to clear out towards the end.
Yes.
But at bar close, Don Cooper was there,
Yes.
and Ron Ruck was there,
Yes.
Kelly Labonte,
Yes.
Mark Jensen,
Yes.
and a number of other people that you maybe can't remember.
That's correct. I know there's a broker from Ohio, but I can't remember his name.
What time did the bar close?
Probably 2 or 2:30.
Okay. So 2 or 2:30, the bar closes. And at 2:34, you are on the phone with your wife.
Yeah, let her know. Yes.
And how long would it take you to get from the bar area to your room?
Few minutes.
So when the bar closed around 2 or 2:30, you went to the lobby.
Yes.
And you were in the lobby with Mark Jensen and Don Cooper.
Yes.
Don Cooper was talking about her divorce that was going on.
I believe so. Yes.
So about 2:30, you go up to your room to call your wife.
Yes.
And that phone call was at 2:34,
Yes.
and it was a 2-minute phone call.
Yes.
Did she call you or did you call her?
I called her.
You called her?
Yep. No, wait a minute. Let's see. No, let's see. I called her, let her know, and then I believe then she called me because that she must have fallen asleep. So,
You have Exhibit 12 up there with you, don't you?
yes.
And prior to 2:34 a.m., the call before that was from November 5th. Is that right? At 11:12 a.m.
Yeah, that was a 21-minute call.
But it's your testimony today that you called her and she called you back?
No. Yes, you're confusing me.
Now, it's your testimony today that during this 2:34 a.m. phone call, you told your wife that Mark was talking about killing his wife, correct?
Correct.
During this 2-minute phone call, right?
I would have checked in and just said, hey, there's conversation, what's going on, and went back down.
Now, on July 30th, 2007, you testified about this phone call as well, right?
Yes.
And counsel, this will be page 69, line 19.
Okay, thank you.
You were asked the question, and in this first conversation at 2:34, you did not talk about Mark Jensen, correct? And your answer was, I don't believe so.
Okay.
That was your testimony?
Yes, you're reading it.
But after this conversation with your wife, you go back down to the lobby
Yes.
and you meet back up with Mark Jensen and Dawn Cooper.
Yes.
And at this point, you're having a discussion about your significant others.
Yes.
The three of you are talking about Dawn's divorce. Correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Cooper, Dawn Cooper, was upset. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And you,
It seems like this gonna be a long trial, boy. I wonder how many witnesses they got in this trial for the last, 24 years, about 2,000.
told Dawn and Mark that you had filed for divorce about a year prior in 1997.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And you filed for divorce in part because of this non-sexual relationship with Stacy Bauer?
It may have been one of the reasons.
Now, you were down in the lobby for less than an hour. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And we know that because you have this second call with your wife
That's correct.
at 3:38 a.m.
Yes.
And that was a 4-minute phone call?
Yes.
Then there's another call at 4:01 a.m.
Yes.
That was 1 minute. Another call at 4:02 a.m. That was 4 minutes.
Yes.
And another call at 4:06 a.m. That was 5 minutes long.
That's correct.
Did you hang up on your wife during that phone call?
Probably.
Probably.
Yes.
And then called her right back?
Yes.
So you two were arguing during that conversation?
Possibly, yeah, because of what I had told her.
Your argument was possibly also about you being out so late?
Possibly.
Your wife had expressed concern that you were in a bar that had women in it during that conversation?
Possibly.
Now, your testimony today was that Mark told you about websites.
That's correct.
Did he specifically give any website addresses?
Yeah, he talked about poison. He talked about howtokillyourwife.com.
So howtokillyourwife.com
Yeah.
was something he brought up?
Yes.
Now, the next morning, you spoke with Ronald Ruck earlier in the day.
Yeah, he came to my room to pick me up to go to the conference.
And at that point, you told Mr. Ruck that you had stayed up all night with Mark talking.
Yes.
And you had told him that you had stayed up late talking about killing your wives. Right?
Yes.
So you were a part of that conversation as well.
What do you mean? Well, yeah, I was talking to Mark.
And you were wife bashing.
Yes.
What specifically did you say about your wife?
I don't remember. Probably this fact that I had filed divorce and we got back together, and it's having conversation.
So it's your testimony today that you didn't say
Listen
anything
very
mean
carefully,
about your wife that night?
Oh, I'm sure I did.
very carefully.
Now, when you talked to Mr. Ruck that morning, you were laughing when you talked about this, weren't you?
It was not. It was probably more of a shock than a laugh.
But you were laughing.
Possibly.
Your Honor, if you'd like, this might be a good spot to take a break and I can continue my cross after the break. I know it's 10:30 and at least some at this table would like a couple minutes.
All right, sounds like we need a break from the defense side. So folks, going back, please don't talk about the case. Thank you. Let's say 10:35, we'll try.
Hold on, I can put on speakers on here.
You now tuned in to the Mark Jensen trial. It's your boy T Weezy, Dangerous Minds 2.0, Smoke a Lot Media 2.0. Tune in.
I need love. I need love. I need love. I need love.
hell, trying to stay away from jail cells. Chosen by God, but born into sin to raise hell. Will I prevail, going toe to toe against my flesh? Or will I fall, just another victim like the rest? My baby boy got him laying on my chest. As I think about his future, one day he'll be a ruler. He wasn't playing, but I'm glad I got my junior. When I see his smile, I say it should have happened sooner. There's nothing cooler than being a dad. Babies grow up with no daddies, always wishing they had. See the anger in the youth, you can tell that they sad. Hearing rich kids brag about the things that they have. Do the math, what's left for me and my crew? When it's me and it's you and the little 22, I need God on my worst of days, especially when I can't think. On my knees I pray.
I need love.
That's exactly what they missing. You gotta listen to the children.
I need love.
That's exactly what they missing. You gotta listen to the children.
I need love.
They crying out, can you hear it? Gotta feel it in your spirit.
I need love.
That's exactly what they missing. You gotta listen to the children. The children in America don't believe anymore. They living in poverty, so they really ain't got no hope. They think that it's a joke when we speaking about change. Cause when they look around, everything is still the same. I know that it's a shame, but we the ones to blame. We need to lend a helping hand, come make a change. Do something to show the kids that you still care. And also let them know that your love is still there. I'm looking at myself from a higher point of view. If you really wanna make a change, it's gotta come from out of you. Come on, Michael, tell me who's the man in the mirror. He's visible now, it's becoming a little clearer. I see all of my followers, but where is all my leaders? Has all the soldiers of the world become weaker? We running out of time, the future is turning gray. Step on out of that coffin, it's a brighter day.
I need love.
That's exactly what they missing. You gotta listen to the children.
I need love.
That's exactly what they missing. You gotta listen to the children.
I need love.
They crying out, can you hear it? Gotta feel it in your spirit.
I need love.
That's exactly what they missing. You gotta listen to the children.
I need love.
Need your love. I need your love.
I need love.
Need your love. I need your love.
I need love. I need love. I need love.
I need your love.
I love you, Dad.
I love you too, son. I need your love.
Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record on Mark Jensen. The appearances are the same. The jury's back in the courtroom. We're continuing with the cross-examination. Mr. Klug, you're still under oath. You can start anytime you want, Ms. Renner.
I'd like to talk about other people now that you've told about this conversation with Mr. Jensen. You testified you told your secretaries about the conversation,
Yes,
and you specifically told them that Mark talked about killing his wife.
that's correct.
And it's your testimony today that you told them the Monday after the Blueprint conference?
Yes,
And again, you testified on July 30th of 2007, right?
yes.
And at that time, you swore to tell the truth.
I'm objecting. This is asked and answered. Just go to the line.
Where are we going again? What subject are we at?
We are talking now about his conversations with other people regarding the conversation with Mr. Jensen.
So if the,
Go ahead.
just to clarify, so if the question is about something previously said in testimony, just go there. instead of all these preliminary questions. You testified before, you swore to tell the truth. I'm
Are
objecting.
you trying to impeach him with prior testimony?
Yes.
And what was his answer? What did he say different?
On page 68, line 24,
Which date, Council?
the 30th of July, 2007. The question was asked, and is this the first time? Then do I understand that the first time you spoke with your secretaries was after the charges in this case as well? Answer, no. No, that's something we talked about after Mark's wife had died.
So what's the impeachment?
He just testified that he told his secretaries about this the Monday after the conference, which was prior to Julie Jensen's death.
Okay, let's move on to another subject.
Prior to testifying today, did you review any documents?
Yes.
What did you review?
I read the transcript.
The transcript from your testimony on July 30th of 2007?
Whatever was provided.
Your testimony on July 30th of 2007 never mentioned ethylene glycol or antifreeze. Is that correct?
I don't recall.
Your testimony that day talked about poisoning with Benadryl, right?
Yes.
First time you testified about antifreeze was on January 8th of 2008, right?
Yes.
Now, in addition to telling your secretaries about this conversation, you testified you told Ron Ruck, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yes.
After testifying in these cases, you also would tell clients about your testimony in this case.
Not that I recall.
You don't recall indicating that you were a star witness?
Is there a specific client?
They're about to jump up out that seat, shaking, nervous.
You also had a viewing party for television coverage on this case.
I had a client that owned a supper club, and yes, I had invited friends to watch the 2020 in 48 hours, I believe.
And that was a viewing that you set up?
Yes,
You invited people to it?
possibly.
He invited a viewing party.
Now,
What the
I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 13. Is that up there with you still?
This shit get real
Yes.
hilarious.
And that's your notes about this case?
Yes.
Damn, he was lining it up.
And today, you testified first that you wrote those in 2007. And then you testified you wrote them in 2002?
He knew something about.
No, it would be 2002, because that's what the date is on the notes.
So you didn't write these immediately after your conversation with Mr. Jensen?
No,
You didn't write them in the year after 1999?
It's very, very.
No.
very-
You didn't write them in the year 2000?
no,
You didn't write notes in the year 2001?
She called.
no, it's 2002. You can get right to that date.
So there was 4 years in between the conversation and your notes?
Yes.
She called as hell. What y'all think?
And in your notes, you write, she was depressed. That was in reference to Julie Jensen, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because Mark was talking about how his wife was depressed.
Yes.
You also, in these notes, talk about Mr. Jensen being unhappy in his marriage.
Yes.
In these notes, nowhere does it say ethylene glycol, does it?
No.
And nowhere does it say antifreeze.
No.
The only drug mentioned in these notes is Benadryl.
That's correct.
Now, you said you created these notes for a anticipated conversation with police or the district attorney's office,
Yes.
and you testified that you called the Pleasant Prairie Police Department.
That's correct.
In fact, you called the district attorney's office, didn't you?
I don't recall. I know.
And at that time, when you called the district attorney's office in 2002, that was after Mark had been charged,
Yes.
and you had read the criminal complaint at that time?
I did not read the criminal complaint.
No?
No.
When you spoke with the district attorney's office in 2002, you did not bring up this conversation, correct?
I think I was telling them that the conversation that we had and that they wanted to talk to me about more information.
No, you in fact called them and said that you thought they should check the computer in Appleton.
Possibly.
You didn't tell the district attorney's office or law enforcement about this conversation until 2007 when they reached out to you, right?
Possibly.
And as far as these notes go, you testified about the note in 2008 in January, correct?
Yes.
But you also testified on July 30th of 2007. And page 23, counsel, beginning at line 19.
Okay.
Question was asked, you don't have any notes about a trip to St. Louis in November 1998? Answer, I made a few notes about when Mark became my boss. And when I was in St. Louis, I had to, find the calendar and get the dates. Question, so you have notes showing that you went to St. Louis. Is that what you're telling me? Answer, yes. Question, do you have any notes about any conversation you had with Mr. Jensen during that time? Answer, no, I don't. Question, any sort of recording, audio, video, anything like that? Answer, no, I don't. Question, anything on a computer, any emails, anything else reflecting anything about these supposed conversations? Answer, no. That testimony was in 2007, right?
Okay.
5 years after you wrote this note? 5 years after you wrote these notes in 2002? Right?
Yes.
And looking at these notes, it appears that there are places where you added more information after writing the initial piece. Is that true that you did that?
Those are my notes. I don't know if things were added.
You don't know if things were added,
I don't know.
but they're all in your handwriting?
They're in my handwriting, yes.
But most of it is in cursive, but some of it is printed?
Possibly, yes.
And most of the lines start along the left, but some of them start in the middle of the page?
Yeah.
Those would be things you added later?
Or after I read it.
Give me y'all perspective. Do y'all think the district attorney could charge him after this case over? Yes or no?
And in those notes, you specifically state you can't remember everything
That's correct.
because you were drinking?
No. The length of time.
Now, Mr. Klug, you're no longer a stockbroker, right?
That's correct.
You're now working in real estate?
I'm a realtor, yes.
And while you were a stockbroker, there are times that you would make trades without a
I'm
client's.
objecting, Judge. We addressed this in a pretrial motion.
Sustained, we did. So we're not going to go into it.
Your Honor, I'm not going into those
You're
things.
going into it.
From 2013 to 2015, you worked with a woman named Shelley Burnt.
I'm objecting to the relevance of this testimony. If some other witness is going to be called, then that's relevant. But in terms of what Mr. Klug has to say about that, that's not relevant.
What sort of relevance are we trying to establish?
This is prior acts of untruthful conduct.
Judge, this was the subject of a pretrial
On the
motion.
back, folks.
I think I covered enough of the Jensen trial. You have to tune in to the local news to see the trial, rest of the trial. I just covered that much. Thanks for tuning in.
Jury is outside of the courtroom. I thought we had a motion hearing and I said nothing's coming in and suddenly it's all coming in.